I want to welcome people back to my next Zoom conversation. And the guest today is Janann Sherman, who is a historian and biographer of Margaret Chase Smith. Welcome. How are you?
I am just great. Glad to see you.
It's good to see you. Where are you coming to us from today?
I am at my home on Vinalhaven, Maine.
Very good. Well,
What a wonderful place.
If we have some time at the end, I'll want to hear more about how you wound up in Vinalhaven.
Okay.
But for now, we're hoping that we have a good internet connection. So bear with us. All right. So you are the author of this biography about Margaret Chase Smith, No Place for a Woman, A Life, I'm trying to get the lighting right here, A Life of Senator Margaret Chase Smith. How did you come to this topic of Margaret Chase Smith?
Well, I'd long been interested in women in politics. As an undergraduate, I did a project with Lady Bird Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
But Lady Bird, while she was cooperative and very nice, she told me that I would not be able to go any further than this simple project because she was locking up her papers until 50 years after she was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Where she put it, not in your lifetime, honey. So I went off to graduate school knowing I wanted to do something about a woman in politics, but not really sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was my mentor, actually, David Oshinsky, who had just been interviewing Senator Smith for his book on McCarthy. And he suggested I go up to Skowhegan and see her and see if this was a viable project. So I did. And he wrote a letter of introduction. It was great.
What year would that have been?
1986.
Okay. And just to follow up on Lady Bird, I can't remember when she passed away, but when will the 50 years be up?
Not for a long time.
Okay.
She lived into the 80s.
Well, I'm thinking, I'm trying to remember, did Lyndon Johnson, did he die like in the early 70s?
Yes.
Yeah, and she lives after him, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you came up and met Margaret Chase Smith in 1986. And I assume that was the first time you had met her?
Yes.
Yeah.
First time in Maine.
Okay. And I assume you had already knew something of Margaret Chase Smith?
Well, yeah, I had read the book that she and Bill Lewis had done together. Actually, it was a source of some trepidation because it was not a nice book, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And it didn't really reveal who she was, but made me very curious.
Yeah. It's not so much a biography or autobiography. It's very much of a political biography. It's like about certain topics during her political career.
Right.
Yeah. So there was definitely a need for a biography.
Yeah, I hadn't intended to do a biography initially.
Oh, interesting.
I thought I would just do a project for graduate school, looking at her relationship with women through the era that she was in office.
Yeah.
But then when I got around to starting to look at this and realized there was no biography, I thought, oh, what a tragedy that there was no comprehensive study of who she was.
Yeah.
And while I felt very unworthy of taking on such a project, I couldn't help myself.
And how did your initial meeting with Margaret Chase Smith go?
Well, it was a little rocky, actually. First, well, she was very charming, very welcoming to strangers, come in and sit down and talk. But almost the first thing she asked me was why I was there. And I said I was interested in women in politics. And she very forcefully said, you need to understand that I never was a woman. I never was a woman politician. I never was a woman senator. And I'm not a feminist either, she said. So that sort of rocked me back a little bit.
Yeah.
And I spent very many months trying to figure out what she meant by those remarks.
Yeah.
She became sort of this code that I spent a lot of time trying to understand.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you've mentioned Senator Smith, I am going to do a share screen here. And here's a picture of you with Senator Smith. And
oh, yeah, that's in our backyard.
Yeah. In Skowhegan?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we stayed in a series of little apartments in Skowhegan. And finally, I managed to lure her over to have barbecues and stuff in the backyard. And I was taking one of those.
So we had, I know that I think you actually lived in an apartment complex where I wound up living in Skowhegan on Purcelli Drive. And then we were talking recently how you lived in an apartment in a very historic building in Skowhegan called the Lock Tavern.
Right.
Were there other places that you lived in Skowhegan?
Yeah, in fact, this picture was taken. I lived in a little apartment tacked on the back of a house on Oak Street, right next to the bank.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, we got an apartment wherever we could afford it to come for a few months.
How long did you wind up staying in Skowhegan?
Well, I came back for long weekends and brief times while I was in graduate school. After I took my exams, then we moved up there.
Okay.
We stayed a year and then we left, and we came back for a few months and then we left.
Okay.
It was like that. You know, I had to go home and raise some money or write some grants so I could pay some rent. So it was drawn out quite a long time.
Yeah. So you first came in '86, and how long was the research part of your work?
It was endless. In '86, as I said, I was just trying to do some small project for graduate school.
Okay.
But once I determined that there was so much there to work with, oh my goodness, what an incredible archive. I made arrangements then to come back and stay and really became committed to doing the whole thing. That was in 1990. And I left. I took the job in Memphis in 1994. So it was more or less the whole time, those 4 years.
Okay. And did this become your dissertation?
Yes, the first half.
Okay.
My committee really didn't want to stick with me through the whole thing.
Okay.
So I wrote about her life up until she was elected to the Senate in 1948.
Okay.
Then I took the job in Memphis, and I still had another full dissertation, if you will, to write while I was working.
For the book, to finish off the book part. Okay, very good. When did you defend your dissertation?
On her birthday.
Oh.
In 1993.
December 14th, 1993.
Exactly.
And I know the book signing was in 1999, so the book had. And that was in December as well, I believe, of 1999.
Yes, it was.
So I know these projects take a long time. So you know, your first inquiries, first visit is in '86, and the book comes out in the late '90s. I had a similar experience with my book. It was about 12 years from conception to actual delivery.
Exactly.
Wow,
that's actually fairly typical for historians.
Oh yeah, because we have to. It's not like I always say. I wasn't working on the book the whole time. There's lots of other things you're doing as well.
Well, you have to live.
Yes, and part of your living was that you taught at the University of Memphis.
That's when, I got my first academic job at the University of Memphis in 1994.
Okay.
And that's where I was when I retired in 2013.
Yeah. And what sorts of courses did you teach?
I taught, my specialization was America since 1945. So even though my narrow specialization is women in American politics, but for general courses, I got to teach all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I taught about the civil rights movement and the Cold War and the Vietnam War and the student movement. I mean, it was great. I had more fun teaching.
What got you interested in history? I mean, did you always have an interest in history?
I always had an interest in history. I had an earlier career. See, I was a late bloomer. I had an earlier career as an electronic technician for Motorola when I first got out of high school. But I read history for fun.
Yeah.
I was very interested, got really consumed by Russian history.
Interesting.
But I could never pursue it because I'd have to speak Russian. So once you get into the serious history part, you need to be able to read the language, and that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
I lived in Arizona, so I read a lot about Western history, about the settlement of the West, and I just absorbed, consumed history. I loved it. Although when I went to college, I couldn't decide.
Okay.
I couldn't make up my mind. I studied psychology and history.
Okay. When you were going through junior high school and high school, could you have foreseen becoming a historian, becoming a college professor of history?
No.
Okay. So
I grew up very poor. Nobody talked about somebody like me ever going to college. That just wasn't on the radar screen. That was getting above your raisin, as they used to say.
Okay. Where did you wind up going to college?
I ended up going to college in the Ozarks. I went to School of the Ozarks.
Okay.
Something happened in between, and I'll make it short. My husband and I both worked for Motorola for many years in Phoenix. He lost his eyesight. He went blind. And when he did, he stopped working there. I stopped working there, and we ran away to the Ozarks to try to regroup.
Okay.
And he was eligible, or I was eligible to use his GI Bill, which he had never used. And that's how I went to school. At the age of 35, I started at a little community college in northern Arkansas.
Okay. So that's
and I loved it. Oh my goodness.
Oh, good. So and then you did your graduate work at Rutgers?
Yes, I got a full scholarship to Rutgers.
In New Jersey. Very good.
Yeah.
So what were your first impressions of Margaret Chase Smith?
I guess the very first impression was that she was so little. I mean, I had always thought of her as being tall and kind of stately somehow. My very first memory of Margaret Chase Smith was the 1964 presidential convention, the GOP convention in San Francisco.
Okay.
Because I was living in Arizona.
Yeah.
Barry Goldwater was our guy.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the convention and I see a woman standing up in a box and having her name nominated. And I never forgot that. But that was the only sort of tangible thing I had with Margaret Chase Smith till I met her. But I know you've seen pictures there in the library where she's, the way they took the picture, I realized after I analyzed it, is that the photographer was like on the floor because she looked as tall as her doorway in the Senate office building.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a shock because she was so little and so nice. I mean, she was so nice.
In terms of doing your research, did quite a bit of it become interviewing her?
Yes, but not at first.
Okay.
She got a little uncomfortable with me asking too many questions. I mean, she had a lot of sort of well-worn stories that she told everybody, and she was very comfortable with those. But when I wanted more, well, she didn't know who I was. I mean, I showed up on the street. Here I am. I want to write about you. So she treated me at arm's length for almost a year and a half before she really would talk to me in any real way.
Yeah.
So sort of courtship.
Okay. Okay. You took the right approach, going slow. Talk about your research process then. It wasn't just a matter of coming and doing interviews with Margaret Chase Smith.
No, I started out in the archives.
Okay.
I was a bit dismayed to learn that her files were filed alphabetically instead of chronologically, which I know that James McCampbell really believed in doing it that way. But it made it very difficult for me to just figure out what she did when.
Yeah.
The scrapbooks were invaluable. So I spent a year probably in the scrapbooks, just trying to get an outline of her life. Then I could go into the documents and fill in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the time then that we finally started talking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to now share the screen again, and we're going to see a picture of you with the scrapbooks.
Oh, yes, forever with the scrapbooks.
Well, when we have school kids today, Angie, the librarian, asked them to guess how many scrapbooks there are. I think it's something like 540 today, which is a bit more than when you were here because we continue to add to the scrapbook. But
there was almost 500.
Yeah, this photo gives people a good flavor that there are a lot of scrapbooks.
And they're full of just wonderful stuff. Yeah. Besides, the tools for a biography, they're full of pressed flowers and invitations to the White House from Eleanor Roosevelt, and that sort of stuff is so enchanting.
Yeah. And the other beauty of them is they are chronological.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So they made it possible.
So scrapbooks, a good basis, and on the other end of it, being able to interview Margaret Chase Smith. Were there other important sources that you had?
Well, certainly the Congressional Record.
Okay.
I've read endless pages of the Congressional Record and of hearings and all that sort of stuff. I really probably I'd have gotten done a little sooner if I hadn't gotten so absorbed in all of what I was looking at. But it was absolutely a fabulous education.
Excellent. And so, this becomes your dissertation. You say you took it up to her, was it her Senate election in 48?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you return to the project and sort of the book stage, carrying beyond that. And was that, again, a matter of coming back to Skowhegan and doing more research?
Part of that was Greg Gallant, who was in charge at that time. He let me make a lot of copies of things.
Okay.
But it certainly slowed down the process because I was teaching full time. Yeah. Plus, my husband was basically dying. So that slowed the project much more than I had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
I really hoped I'd get it out before she died, but I didn't.
Did you use other archives?
Oh, yeah. I traveled quite a bit. I went to the Dirksen Center, for example. Okay. I spent a lot of time in the National Archives. I'm trying to remember, there were several other of her colleagues' archives that I went to. Oh, of course, the Goldwater papers. That was a disaster, but I did go to the Goldwater.
Why was that a disaster?
Well, because when he decided to run for president, he had all these files. Yeah. And so he thought the thing to do was to put them all on microfilm.
Okay.
And then he apparently stored the microfilm in a warehouse in Phoenix where they got wet. The files on his Senate years are almost non-existent.
Now, did they destroy the original paper documents when they microfilmed?
Yes.
Ooh, big mistake.
Big mistake.
Yeah. Never destroy the originals.
That's right.
And the whole reason I became a
the whole point was to get rid of all that stuff. So that's what he did.
The whole reason I became a modern American historian is so I wouldn't have to read microfilm.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's horrible.
And just so people know, Everett Dirksen, he would have been the Republican leader in the Senate during many of Margaret Chase Smith's years in the Senate. So very important figure in the Senate. So in reflection, what are your enduring memories of this project? Or of Margaret? What'd you take away?
my takeaway is that I became very close to her right at the end. Um, she, most of the people she knew and had worked with all her life were gone. And she really had only people came to visit her who had some sort of reason to want to be seen with her or to take her out to lunch or whatever. I remember the very first time I went along on one of these little excursions, she had a limousine showed up with all of these generals with all the ribbons and stuff, and they all wanted to take her to lunch, paying her their respects. And she had a grilled cheese sandwich. And I couldn't it didn't make sense to me. And I talked it over with Charlie, and he's the one who solved the riddle. He said she couldn't see. And that was one thing she could eat without embarrassing herself, without making a mess. And that was so sad.
Yeah.
So we started inviting her over to our house and have ribs and corn on the cob and get messy, because she didn't have to be anybody's celebrity. She didn't have to be the center of attention. And I think that's the fondest memory I hold of her.
Well, usually part of the grilled cheese story is that she liked it to be burned, because our theory, it helped her to be able to see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she tried so hard to hide that she couldn't see, but of course she instantly bonded with Charlie, who couldn't see himself and had tried to, make a life for himself regardless. And they shared tips and ideas and things. When she was more comfortable with men anyway.
So, I mean, this is something that just popped into my head. Did you ever get concerned with the objectivity aspect of the project, given that you did develop a friendship with her?
Very much so. I was really glad that I finished the book after I had moved to Memphis and I could get some distance. I mean, we were still exchanging bread and butter notes and so forth. But I had also been very well trained as a historian, but I did spend a lot of time questioning myself, how much of this is her and how much is me. And I think I managed to overcome most of that, but some reviews that I read said that they could, feel the respect, even the love that I had for her, although, I'm kind of hard on her in some parts of the book. So I think that's a pretty good balance, and I'm comfortable with that now.
You had referred to the code. Did you feel as though you came to understand the code?
Well, this gets into a little complex, but I'll start with it. What I saw in the records, in the archives, and what she told me about similar instances were totally at odds. What I saw was a very ambitious, achieving woman who didn't let anything stop her when she wanted to do something, and she knew what was right and wrong and all that. But what I heard from her when she told these stories is that, well, she was just happened to be in that place at the right time. She never really ever sought to run for president. It was because people came and asked her. And I'm dumbfounded, frankly, by this. And I didn't know what to do with it for a long time. I mean, how do I reconcile these two people that I'm seeing? What is this book going to look like? If I hadn't talked to her, it'd be a very different book. But I had to make sense of it. And I finally, just to simplify it, I finally came down to the fact that women weren't ambitious. She was very much a product of her time. And she believed it, what this gender conventions were in her era. And women were not ambitious. Women were helpful, and they followed, people who asked them to do things and so forth. I didn't really come to that realization till I read an autobiography of Eleanor Roosevelt, who talked about her life in the same way. And it was just really hard to make that all balance out. But I finally realized that this is the way she saw herself. She wasn't just telling me a tale, but this was what she really believed herself to be. And
She grew up in a time when there was no place for a woman.
Exactly. Exactly. You could never own up to being ambitious and wanting to get in office. No, it was because Clyde asked her to. And she just felt like she had no choice. Well, this sounds pretty ludicrous to me in today's world, but it wasn't in her world. And that was very difficult to get that part figured out.
Okay, interesting. So another project that you got involved with, which is one that I'm quite mindful of because it's a project that periodically reappears on Maine public television and the local cable access television station. Senator Margaret Chase Smith, a biography done by a man named Jeff Dobbs. If I remove my finger, the host is Jack Perkins, who used to work for NBC News. And,
Jack Perkins was saying some of my words in that film. It was an odd thing.
Well, you become the official expert talking head in the documentary.
Jeff Dobbs called me, said he wanted to do a documentary for biography on PBS on Margaret Chase Smith, and he wanted to base it on my book. This was about 2007 or 8. I published the book in 2000 and I never looked at it again.
Really? Wow.
You know, when you publish a book, you've had it. I mean, I walked around with her in my head for 14 years. So I never read it, actually, once it made it to press. So when Jeff said he wanted to fly me up to Bar Harbor and we do the filming there and blah, 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 I had to read the book.
That's funny.
So I treated myself to a little trip on a schooner out of Camden, 3-day trip, took the book. I'm going to read it while I'm on that boat.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Okay.
But filming it was excruciating.
Okay. How many?
I don't like.
Did you do it all in one day, or was it over a couple of days?
It was 2 days.
Okay.
But they were 10-hour days.
Oh.
And he would say things like, "Okay, I want you to tell me about her run for president in 1964." And then he'd count down with his fingers, 3, 2, 1, and point at me. And here I am, I'm thinking, I don't want to look at it like a deer in the headlights. I need to get the story straight. I got to keep all the details in. I don't need to say, I mean, it was just, and then sometimes I get done 20, 30 minutes talking and he'd say, "That was pretty good. Let's try that again."
Well,
he ultimately shot 3 CDs loaded with raw footage. He sent them to me in Memphis and said, "Look at him and let him know if there was anything I didn't want him to use." I never looked at him.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at him.
Now
I finally said, "I'll leave it up to you."
You said you hadn't.
He did a great job.
You said you hadn't read the book. Have you seen the documentary?
I finally did when somebody came to visit. It was on my coffee table, and she said, "Let's watch it." Yeah. Ooh.
No, you came off. You came off very well. You came off.
I did,
authoritative.
Because he didn't use me too much, which is why.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a lot of other things in that film, which is great.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
He did. It came out.
You know, it's available on YouTube now.
Yes. Actually, it's on we have a YouTube channel called The MCS Library. So I believe you can see it there. And yes, it is available on YouTube. And it's also where these conversations, these interviews that I do, they're also available there as well. And your book is also available. I know we still have copies for sale. And it's one that we recommend when people ask, what's the biography of Margaret Chase Smith? And the video as well are good ways to get a good first knowledge of Margaret Chase Smith.
Well, thank you.
Well, and I glossed over that and had one more picture to show, and that is your book signing. So as you signing away, this was in December of 1999. You came and gave a talk about the book and the project, and sign books for people. And so as we conclude, we still have a few more minutes. How did you wind up in Vinalhaven, Maine, from Arizona, the Ozarks, and Memphis?
Yeah, New Jersey was in there too.
Oh, Rutgers, yes.
Well, when we were living in these little apartments, I'm there with a blind husband, right? He can't go anywhere, he can't drive, he can't do anything on his own. So every free moment we could snatch away, we looked at Maine. Mm-hmm. We investigated every corner of Maine. And basically we fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. And one of the places that we ended up taking the ferry out to Vinalhaven, mm-hmm. Charlie used to call that a poor man's cruise. It's such a beautiful trip as you wind around through the little islands out there. Mm-hmm. And we made friends on the island. We used to come out for a day. We come in the weekend, come out on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. And we started talking about retiring here. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, once we moved to Memphis, his health deteriorated and he eventually died there, and we didn't come back. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to come back, actually, because it was a dream we shared.
Okay.
But I had a good friend that I went to graduate school with. Both of us were doing teacher workshops in Connecticut at Mystic Seaport. Mm-hmm. And she said, I want to go to Vinalhaven. Let's rent a car. Mm-hmm. And I really was not thrilled to go, but she said, well, we'll just go for a couple of days. If it's too painful, we'll just leave. Mm-hmm. And as soon as that ferry pulled in the harbor, I was done. Mm. That was it.
Wow.
I thought it's hard to live without Charlie.
Yeah.
But it's hard to live without Charlie anywhere.
True.
And so I'm going to go to a place that makes me happy.
Yeah, nice.
That's what I did.
So how long have you been on Vinalhaven now?
Oh, 7 years. I came here in 2013.
Yeah. And how do you like island life?
Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Mm-hmm. I knew it was going to be beautiful because I'd been here. Mm-hmm. What I wasn't prepared for was the community and the spirit of the community here, mm-hmm. which is so welcoming and so helping one another. There's sort of an ethos on the island that says, we're out here in the middle of the ocean all by ourselves. Mm-hmm. We may not always agree with one another, mm-hmm. but we have to take care of each other. Mm-hmm. And I hurt my back not long after I moved in, and I never wondered how I would manage to get by on my own. Mm-hmm. Because there's just a constant string of people looking out for me, looking out for each other. It's amazing. It was the best thing I could have done.
Hmm. How far is it to the mainland by the ferry? How long does it take?
An hour and a quarter.
How often do you get to the mainland?
Well, this year, not.
Okay.
But normally I'd go at least once a month or so.
Okay. To do shopping, or can you take care of all your needs right there on the island?
I can take care of everything on this island except for like doctor's appointments, specialists and stuff. Mm-hmm. We have a nice medical center here, but we don't have doctors and orthopedists and those sorts of things. So that was usually what got me over there. That and taking my dog to get groomed. Mm-hmm.
What is the year-round population of Vinalhaven?
It's just under 1,200.
Okay. And typically would increase quite a bit more in the summertime?
In the summer, estimates are usually about 5,000 or 6,000. There's a lot of people come.
Yeah.
This year there was, well, we didn't have any casual visitors. There's a lot of summer residents on the island, been here for generations. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people came, but they're very respectful. Mm-hmm. Everybody wears masks. Everybody does social distancing. When they arrive, they quarantine themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, there really is sort of a wonderful community here. Mm-hmm. Like I said, looks out for one another, and they're going to be careful. We're very lucky.
I was going to ask you what life on a Maine island during a pandemic is like, and you've just given us a little flavor of that. Because I remember when the pandemic and the quarantining first started, there was quite a celebrated incident on Vinalhaven.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They really blew it up. The papers loved it.
Yeah.
Because it really meshes with those those stereotypes about Mainers and, mountain men and, lumberjacks being obnoxious and so forth. But there was a couple of guys from New Jersey who showed up, and they went in the little convenience store and said they didn't need to follow any rules. They didn't have to wear masks if they didn't want to. They were building a house out on the north end of town, so some of the people who live here took it upon themselves to make sure they quarantined themselves, because they blocked in their house and their driveway with big logs. But what got the attention of the media was that those guys who were in the wrong called the Coast Guard to come rescue them. I guess they figured they were on an island, so it was the Coast Guard's, that it was their responsibility to save them. Anyway, that's the kind of story that the media loves.
Yeah, it got a lot of play. I think, it traveled across the country too.
Yeah.
So otherwise, you're doing well through a pandemic on the island of Vinalhaven.
People visit me almost every day. I have a big deck out in the front of the house. I'm only a few feet off of the Maine north-south road, and people stop and we all visit outside, 6 feet or 10 feet apart, even though there has not been a single case on the island.
Oh, good. That's good to know. Yeah, Maine.
But we're all also careful not to be complacent.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happened in Millinocket.
Yeah. All in all, Maine's been quite fortunate. Very low incidence.
Because we follow the rules.
Yeah. Yes, it will help if people follow the rules. So before we sign off, I think you have a partner with you. Can you show us your partner?
Oh.
Has he gone away?
Yeah, I think she showed up a little bit. She likes to be petted on and rubbed on. And she's this wonderful.
Who do we have?
Her name is Ginger. She's a rescue.
Okay.
She's part Chihuahua and a whole lot of parts of other things.
Well, that's the perfect opportunity to circle back to Margaret Chase Smith, because she liked the Chihuahuas.
I remember.
We had two at different times, Betty and Minutes. In her day, they were referred to as Mexican hairless.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I remember, yes. Although they have lots of hair.
As you're finding out.
Yes, I am. I'm finding it everywhere.
Well, Jan, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me. And again, I will remind people that if they want to know more about Margaret Chase Smith, one of the best ways to do it is to read your biography, No Place for a Woman, or to find that Jeff Dobbs YouTube video in which you are the historical expert giving the background, the context about Margaret Chase Smith. And wish you well.
Thank you.
Enjoy retirement on Vinalhaven off the coast.
It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.